Welcome to this training video on bin tracking, the installation setup and using bin tracking. My name's Anne from Orchid Systems. Bin tracking allows you to manage inventory levels within an IC location at a bin level. So per movement of stock to and from the IC location, you can specify the bin tracking bin number. It's integrated with all the core modules, IC, OE, PO, and it supports third parties that create stock movements through the views, for example, Orchid's RMA, credit notes, and AutoSimply's manufacturing. It's also integrated with Technisoft Service Manager. It supports serialized inventory and lot tracking, and you can define optional fields at a bin transfer header, and bin transfer detail level. You can auto-allocate the bins to the transaction documents by bin setup order, by bin number, or by FIFO or LIFO rules in terms of stock movement in and out of the IC location. You can do an IC physical inventory process and specify the bins associated with that physical inventory, or you can run a cycle count using the physical inventory process in bin tracking. And there's many inquiries and reports on the transaction level and management reports, allowing you to manage your items per bin. In this training, we're going to go through the activation of the module, checking your license, and assigning the visual process flows, which assist you in the transaction processing. We're going to configure bin tracking in the bin tracking options, how to create bins, and using optional fields if you're going to do that. And on the data entry, we're going to look at the bin transfer document and the PIC status screen, which allows you quick access to the bin transfer documents. We're going to run through the physical inventory and data take-ons, both through IC and running an inventory count through bin tracking. And we're going to have a look at the reports and inquiries by bin transfer history, bin replenishment, and empty bins, as well as the bin transfer location and bin totals versus IC location totals. And we're going to look at the periodic processing to deactivate empty bins. All our modules can be downloaded from www.orchid.systems. When you log in, click Product Downloads, and then select the version you want. And then you can scroll down to see all the modules within that version. Per version, we have the sample data, the object model, NFR serial numbers which can be used to activate for 30 days, and then all the modules. So you would download bin tracking from here. And once you've downloaded, you would run the install shield. Specify your programs directory and your shared data directory, and then key in your serial number. If you have specified an activation code at the time of installing, it will create the license file with your activation code. If not, you can go to the associated license screen and enter your activation code had you installed for 30 days. After installing, you would go to the required companies and activate bin tracking. If your prompt to delete during posting is turned on, then bin tracking will give you an error message. You should turn this off, as bin tracking uses the posted transaction details to create the bin transfer document. So you should go to IC Options and deselect that option. And we'd recommend going to Administrative Services, going to the Assign Visual Process Flows, and assign the appropriate users the bin tracking Stocktake and the bin tracking transactions visual process flow, as it aids with the transaction processing. If you had installed and activated using the 30-day option, you can come to the BT license screen and key in your activation code after the fact. The first setup screen to consider is the BT options. Here you specify per transaction which creates an IC movement how you want bin tracking to work. We would recommend that you automatically create the bin transfer document during posting the source document. But your options are to manually create the document, to create the bin transfer document automatically, but only if the location that it's dealing with is binned, or during posting automatically. We would recommend during posting for all transactions. Bin tracking will automatically detect, based on the modules installed, which options you can configure bin tracking around. In this case, it's automatically picked up that we've got RMA installed, and RMA via PO returns can create a stock movement, and via OE credit notes can create a stock movement. If we had Auto Simply installed, we would automatically be able to configure around the 3 different options for Auto Simply. And if we have Service Manager installed and we've done the configuration to enable bin tracking to see Service Manager, we will be able to configure around the Service Manager screens too. When bin tracking creates a document, it can set the status of the bin transfer to not ready for picking or put away, or ready for picking and putting away. If you want a 2-step process where first bin tracking creates the bin transfer document and it's not ready, and then a second person comes and makes it ready, you could set all your documents to not ready. Or if you set it for ready, then these documents are available for picking and put away. Taking the PO receipt as an example of a put away type document, you specify the rules under which bins can be automatically allocated. It can either be a manual allocation, you can specify auto put away, in which case bin tracking will work out which bin to put it in, or auto put away and complete if you do want to complete the document straight away. An example of when you might want to do auto put away and complete is if you always do your receipts into the bulk area at the back and it never gets changed, it's never full, then you could say auto put away and complete. But I'm making ours auto put away. And based on our rules, the bins will be allocated. So you can allocate the bin based on the last bin it was picked from, the last bin it was put away to, or the bin setup put away order, in which case the first bin with the bin setup put away order of 0 or 1, the smallest number to sort, will be the suggested bin. Last bin picked from and last bin put away to, it can only work once you've already put away some items or picked some items. The first time you would need to manually specify the bin. By selecting last bin put away to, you get a FIFO style allocation of bins. The pop-up bin transfer when the source document is posted refers to if I set this to be yes, then when I post my PO receipt, the bin transfer document will open for me to confirm the bins. If I set it to no, then the bin transfer document will not pop up. And if I set it to only if binned, then the bin transfer document will pop up only if at least one of the items on the PO receipt is bin tracked. I'm going to set all my put away type documents to auto pop up. And you can also select this option to auto complete the bin transfer if none of the items are bin tracked. And you can also specify whether or not non-stock items are automatically included on the bin transfer document. And this works in conjunction with one of the options on the Processing tab, which we'll look at shortly. And taking the OE shipment as an example of a pick, we're going to say we automatically create the document during posting. The status will be ready for pick and put away, and our pick method is going to be automatic based on the least recent put away, and that gives us FIFO. And we should set all our picked style documents with the same method and all the put away style documents with the same method. You may, however, have different methods for transfers or assemblies if appropriate. And the last option to consider on this tab is when picking and there's not enough stock for the pick, do you want to give a warning to the person posting the source document, yes or no? On the Processing tab, you can number your bin transfer documents, specifying a prefix, length, and the next number. Whether or not you allow negative quantities per bin, we would recommend no. And whether or not you allow transfers in stocking unit of measure. We could set up a bulk bin and only allow movements in cases and boxes, etc. for all our items, and then allow transfers in stocking unit of measure. We say no, and that means we need to move the items out of the bulk bin in cases and boxes to a bin which allows for the picking in eaches. For the bin finder, you can show all bins or only those bins which are available for an item. But if you have many items and many bins, selecting this option might be quite a lot slower than if you show all bins in the finder. And when you complete a bin transfer, the system can validate that the quantities to pick equals the quantity picked. And you can set the control to allow it to be completed when there's no source document, i.e. you're doing a bin transfer document only, and when there's a source document. So if I say give a warning, it would warn me if I'm trying to complete a document where my OE source document says pick 10 and we've only picked 9 on the bin transfer. And here you can set the system-wide default whether or not you include non-stock items on your bin transfer documents. So here we've said yes, but then transaction by transaction type, you can specify whether or not you want to include non-stock items on this particular bin transfer document associated with, in this example, an IC receipt. And on the Items tab, you can define whether or not only the items listed below are bin tracked, or all the items listed below are bin tracked except for these ones. And maybe you want to specify a mask for those items that you don't want to bin track. So if, for example, all your promotional items were in the category XX, you could have those not bin tracked, whereas all the other items will be bin tracked. And finally, we have the Updates tab, as we do with all Orchid modules. And here you can click Check for Updates to ensure that you're on the latest product update. And if you select this option, it will notify the admin user when they first log on after a new product update has been loaded to our website. You can define optional fields that you've created in Common Services and define them to be active on a bin level, a bin transfer header, and a bin transfer detail. For those optional fields that you have defined at a bin transfer header or bin transfer detail level, if one of the source transactions, for example, order entry shipments, PO receipts, or any of the IC transactions, have the same optional field defined at the same level, then the optional field will be copied across from the source document to the associated bin transfer document. In the bin setup screen, you create your bins per IC location. Per IC location, you select whether this location is bin tracked or not, and then you go ahead and enter your bin. The bin number is 10 characters long, and there is no mask for the bin number, but we do recommend you use some structure, so if you sort by your bin number, you'll get an order through the location. If you are allocating bins by bin pick order, you can number your preferred bins number 1 or number 0, for example, and then all other bins or least preferred bins become 2, 3, 4. But if you're picking by least recent put away or most recent put away, pick order is irrelevant. And same for put away order. You can save for your bins whether you allow to receive into or allow picking from. So if you did want to have a bulk area at the back of the warehouse where you allow receiving into but don't allow picking from, so you'd have to do a bin transfer from the bulk area to the picking face, you could set that up. But in our case, we're allowing receiving and picking from all bins. And if you want, you can have a quick bin code. So instead of typing A010101, I can just type in P to get the pick face. If you allow all items in the bin, then you do not need to come and add items here, as they will appear once the items have been checked into the bin. But if you do not want to allow all items in the bin, you can say no and then come and specify the item or items that you do allow in that bin. But in our case, we're allowing all items in the bin. If you make a bin a temporary bin, you can then use the periodic processing to deactivate temporary bins, which are empty. And this is designed more if you're going to use a container as a bin. So if a container arrives in the car park and you're going to pick from the container, you can make it a temporary bin, and then once it's empty, it can be deactivated. If required, you can make a bin no longer active, and then it will no longer be suggested to pick or put away into, even though there's stock in that bin. And if you have optional fields defined at the bin level, you can enter them here. We recommend you enter a few bins and then export, and then do the bin take on from your imported spreadsheet. We can extend the spreadsheet by including the other locations and filling out all the bin details for all the locations, and then importing the spreadsheet. Note your location codes and bin codes must be strings. We now have bins for location 1, 2, 3, and 4, but our goods in transit location we have not yet created for bins, and we're not going to create bins for the trans location. Now that we've done our setup, we can take on our opening stock balances by bin. There's 3 ways that you can do this. If you are starting bin tracking at the same time you're starting IC, then you can take on the bin tracking quantities at the same time that you take on your IC quantities. And that might be you do an IC stocktake and then enter the bins per quantity in the bin tracking worksheet, or you could do an IC receipt, and then when you post that receipt, bin tracking will create the bin transfer document for that receipt at the same time, and you'd fill in the bins on the bin transfer document. Or you could do a PO receipt, and when you post the PO receipt, bin tracking will create the bin transfer document at the same time, and you can fill in the bins for the item quantities on the associated bin transfer document. But in my case, IC has already been started, so we need to take on bin tracking after IC, in which case we could do an IC stocktake and then enter the quantities per bin on the bin tracking worksheet, post the bin tracking worksheet, which will create the bin transfer document to reflect the quantities per bin, and then delete the IC worksheet. And I will be running through the stocktake procedure later, so I'm going to do it via the 3rd method, which is to export my IC quantities by location, massage that export, and import it into a new bin transfer document where the source document is none. It's not linked to an associated IC document, OE document, or PO document, and then complete the bin transfer document. From the IC location detail screen, I'm going to export all my quantities, and I'm only going to export those items where the quantity on hand as per the last day end is greater than 0. Bin tracking keeps track of the quantities per item, per bin, per location, not costs, so we're not exporting any of the cost fields. And there's a template to import a bin transfer document in the import directory. And depending whether you're using lots or serial numbers, we've got different templates, but I'm just going to go for the put away using a regular item. So the header of the import is going to create a new document, and on the transfer details, I need to have the uniqueifier, the line number, the action, which 2 is a put away, the item number, the location, and the bin, the quantity, and the unit of measure. And if we massage the data and paste it onto our template, we can then import this template. After verifying this bin transfer document, we can complete the document. We could now run the bin totals versus location totals report to confirm that it's in sync. Here we could either select to show the variance lines only, We can see our variances with respect to IC are the negative quantities we have on IC, which we did not take on, and our lot tracking items, as we have not taken on the lot numbers. Now that we've done our setup and we've taken on our stock, we'll go ahead and do some transactions. The first transaction we're going to do is a PO receipt. So we're going to record the PO receipt and enter the items per location, enter any serial or lot numbers if appropriate, and post the PO receipt. And then because of our configuration, bin tracking is going to automatically create the bin transfer and pop it up on the screen, as that's what our configuration was. And based on our configuration, it's going to assign the bins based on our preferred put away method, which is the last bin we picked from. And then we can just confirm those bins, change them if we need to, and complete the bin transfer document. But we'll see also if we weren't auto-assigning bins, we could auto-assign them at that point in time, just before we complete the document, or we could manually provide the bins required. It does not matter whether we do a PO receipt and apply it to an original PO number, or just do an unapplied PO receipt. It's at the point of posting the PO receipt that bin tracking recognizes the stock movement. And when the PO receipt is posted, bin tracking automatically creates the bin transfer document and also pops it up on the screen for us to confirm the bins. And that is because our configuration said to auto pop up for PO receipts. The bin transfer document that's created is applied to the PO receipt, so we can click here to drill into the associated PO receipt. And it has put the two items onto the receipt, and based on our put away rules has allocated the bins. So had we needed to, if that is not where the bin was put away to, we could come in here and change the bin or change the quantity. So for example, if we put away 5 into this bin and 5 into this bin, at this point on our bin transfer detail, it shows us that it's been put away into multiple bins. And if this was a serialized or lot tracked item, we could click on this arrow here and fill in the appropriate quantities per lot per bin. Had we not used the auto allocate put away method, we could click here to auto put away, or we could have just manually filled in the bins. And when we save this document, bin tracking is recognizing it is fully put away, so it's suggesting that we should complete the document. And if that was the case, if this document was complete, we just go yes, and this document would be finished. But I'm going to say no, and I'm going to put it in progress so that the document shows on my pick status screen. The next document we're going to do is a sales shipment, and we're going to use the pick status to open the bin transfer document. So we're going to go ahead and create a sales shipment. We're going to ship the items per location, enter any serial numbers or lot numbers if that was appropriate, and we could print the picking slip including the bins. And then we're going to use the pick status screen to filter and find our transactions, and then open the required bin transfer document or the associated ICPO or SO document. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and confirm our bin transfer document. And if we do an example ship document, so whether we go to order entry and ship from there, or do a shipment entry, whether it's applied or not applied to an order, it's at the point of creating the shipment record that IC does a stock movement, and it's at that point in time that bin tracking will create the associated bin transfer. So when we post the document, bin transfer creates the associated bin transfer document, but does not pop it up because our configuration option says no, don't auto pop up. But we can go to the pick status screen to see the transactions that are not yet complete. So you can see I've got two documents here, one associated with shipment number 62, one with receipt 83. And I could double click here to open up the bin transfer document, double click here to open up the receipt document, and I can also double click here to move the status on. And this screen is intended to show all not complete documents. This is showing in orange or yellow because it's ready but not yet started. This is showing in green because the status is put away in progress. And if any of our transactions were not ready, they'd be showing in red. And we can filter on any one of these columns. So if I was only involved in shipments from location 1, I could use my Control F to filter where my source location equals 1. And this filter is remembered user by user. So if I was only involved with shipments, maybe I would filter on OE shipments, or if I was only involved in receipts, I could filter on receipts or filter by location. To clear the filter, you need to click and go Control F, clear filter. So let's go ahead and have a look at the bin transfer created for the OE shipment. And you can see the 2 items have been put on the shipment and the bins have been allocated based on our picking rules. And it's auto-picked. And if I click Save Now, it's going to suggest that this document is complete and we could go ahead and complete this document. Or we could set it in progress if we want it to remain on the pick status screen. If part of your workflow is you do the sales shipment or do the sales order, ship, print the picking slip, and then as a second person goes ahead and picks and comes back to the screen to confirm that the quantities were picked from these bins, then if it's part of your workflow, you could say, go ahead, create the invoice, and this time when I save the document and complete it, it will go to that OE shipment and invoice accordingly. The bin tracking transactions visual process flow shows the process for each of the PO transactions, OE transactions, IC transactions, or RMA transactions that create a stock movement. The bin transfer document will be auto-created if your configuration says to do so, and then you can open the document from here, from the pick status screen, or it will automatically pop up depending on your configuration. If required, you can print the bin transfer document either from here or from the BT Forms menu option. This will show you the bins for the required document. And this document can be used as a picking slip or a put away slip. Or you could use our customized forms to use the associated documents for order entry and purchase orders. In the bin tracking folder, Sage 300 OY XXA, where XX is your version, in the E&G directory, we have 2 reports designed to be run around your order entry transactions, the OE pick order and the OE pick ship, and 1 for purchase orders. So if you copy the reports to the associated customization directory or E&G directory for the associated modules, you can use these as part of your processing. When doing an OE order and shipping, we can print the picking slip either from the OE order or from the shipment. We would recommend always use the shipment processing because bin tracking is able to allocate and confirm the bins for an OE shipment. The customized form includes the allocated bin on the shipment, and so the items can be picked from those particular bins. If you use the picking slip from the order, it is just a suggested bin, but if the same item is on the same sales order twice, then the same bin will be allocated for both of those picking because it has no idea of a reservation or that items are already allocated from a bin. You can only do that from a shipment. So if picking slips from the order, then the bin allocation will always show you the first preferred bin that has the stock but does not take into consideration other sales orders that picking slips have been printed from which are not yet shipped, because we only allocate the bins on the shipment. So it's recommended that you print your picking slip from the shipment, as it will have the confirmed bins for that particular shipment. There are two ways to do a stock take when you're using bin tracking. One when you generate the workbook using IC, and the other when you generate the workbook using bin tracking. You would use IC when you're counting the entire location or locations, and you would use bin tracking when you just want to do a cycle count. So looking first at the IC method for when we want to count the entire location, you would first do any adjusting entries you need to do to clear up negative stock and items in stock which have a value but no quantity. Then you would do your day end and then generate your IC worksheet. And you would choose your options whether or not you want the quantity to default to 0 or with a value, and whether or not you want to use items only or all items. When IC creates the worksheet, bin tracking creates an associated worksheet for the same locations. So we can go into the bin tracking worksheet. Bin tracking has built this worksheet based on all the items in the bins, and in total per item per location has balancing entries without a bin to make the IC quantity match the BT quantity. So here's all our quantities that are sitting in bins. We've had to do some adjusting entries in order to make our bin tracking quantities match IC quantities. And we see the -1 quantities that we have in IC and the original serialized and lot tracking items that we did not take on correctly with bin tracking. So here we would enter or type in or import any adjustments that we need to do. So if I only had 136 of this item, and if I want to write these items off, and I should go ahead and enter the appropriate lot numbers, serial numbers for these items. And once I've finished my count, I could print this bin reconciliation report for my records and post the bin reconciliation. In posting the bin reconciliation, what bin tracking will do is create a bin transfer for any bin movements and will update the IC worksheet with the total per item per bin. And if successful, will then delete the BT worksheet. So it's created BT6 for the quantities that we've written off, and it's updated the workbook for that particular stock take. So in BT, I now no longer have a workbook. I can go to my BT transaction and we can see the quantity that was written off. And my IC worksheet would have been updated with that same quantity. And to finalize the stock take, I would check the costs here and then go ahead and post this worksheet in IC. But if I wanted to do a stock take by a range of bins, if I want to do, for example, a monthly cycle count, I could choose my range of bins or choose the whole location if I want and start the stock take from within bin tracking. And I can include all items from the bin or only items from use within the bin, default the quantities on hand, and if we're doing a range of locations, we could choose to include or exclude inactive locations. And then we'd go into our bin inventory worksheet and confirm these counts. And once we're happy with our counts, we'd go ahead, we could print the reconciliation for our records and post the bin reconciliation. And this time, because we have no associated IC worksheet, when we post our bin tracking worksheet, it's going to create a stock adjustment for the movement in stock up or down. If we've just done a range of bins like we have done, then we should select the first option to adjust the IC quantities with the change in quantity entered on the bin worksheet. So I wrote off 2 of the 1 item, and it would create a stock adjustment to write off those 2. But if we had, in fact, counted the entire location and we wanted to force the IC quantities for that location to match bin tracking, we could include this second example here. And the reason why you might want to do this instead of doing an IC worksheet in the first place is if you're doing a stock take with lot numbers. Because using an IC worksheet, you cannot introduce a new lot number as part of the worksheet process. You have to first go and do a stock adjustment to create the lot and then come back and do your worksheet. But if you do a bin tracking worksheet and count the entire location, then you can select this option and it will force the IC quantities to match the bin worksheet quantities. But in our case, we just did a range, so we're going to select the first option. And when we go ahead and post, it will create the bin transfer for the quantity adjusted and the stock adjustment for the quantity adjusted, and delete the associated bin transfer. Had any errors occurred, neither of the documents would have been created, and the worksheet would have been updated with the errors, so you could review the errors, fix them, and then attempt to post again. So we could go and look at BT7, and it's associated with stock adjustment 1, and that is the quantity. And if we go to IC, we will see this adjustment, and it's unposted because the cost should first be checked here, and then once you're happy with the costs, go ahead and post the transaction. When working with your bin inventory counts, you can import the bin inventory count, but because the data structure is a header for the location, a detail for the bin and item number, and another detail for the serials and lot numbers, those types of imports work better with the standard Sage 300 templates when you are inserting only, not when you're updating records. Accordingly, we have provided a stock count import program in your OYXXA directory, and when you run this program and log in, it gives you instructions on how to run the import and what files you need. Please also refer to our knowledge base where we have example files for you to use. Now that we've done a few transactions, if we go back to the bin transfer setup, we can discuss a few of the more of the options associated with the bins. You can see once an item has been moved into or out of a bin, you will end up with the item entry associated with that bin. If you allow all items in the bin, you might get multiple item numbers here if you do mix items in a bin. Or if you've only allowed one item in a bin, then you would just see that single item number in that bin. And as you can see, you can have the same item in many bins, and you can have multiple items in a bin if that meets your rules. But even if you haven't yet used an item in a bin, or when an item has been moved into a bin, once you have the record here, you can set specific validations for this item in this bin. The first is you might allow all items in this bin at this level, but down here you might exclude a particular item. The picking sequence from IC will show here for your information. And what you can do is allow either all units of measure within a bin, or you could restrict the unit of measure for this particular bin to being one of the valid units of measure for that item. So in the example where you have a single big bin at the back of the warehouse for bulk items, you might restrict the unit of measure for the bulk bin to being a crate or a dozen. And that would imply that any PO receipt or any shipment from bulk would have to be in that crate unit of measure. And you can say whether you allow or allow with a warning any other unit of measure from this particular bin. And if you were doing this, if your bulk warehouse only allowed movements by crate, then the only way you could move some items from this bin to a picking bin would be through a bin transfer. So a bin transfer could take a crate out of the bulk bin and put a dozen eaches into the picking bin. So here we're saying allow any unit of measure, but we could say only allow or don't allow anything other than the crate unit of measure, or give a warning if they don't use the crate unit of measure or allow any unit of measure. This shows me the current quantity in stock and in this particular bin, and if it was serialized or lot tracked, I could click on the serial number or the lot number drill down to see what the serials and the lots in this particular bin were. And at a high level, it's showing me that I've got 5 in this bin, but overall in IC, in location 1 for this item, I've got 143. And either in the inquiry menu or using the visual process flow, we can use the item per bin for inquiries. So here we can filter at the top. We could filter for just for location 1, or we could filter by using the columns. So if I do Control F, for example, on this bin number or on this item number, Control F to allow me to filter on item A11030, I can see it's in location 1 in bin A010101 and in bin A010103, and in location 2 bin A010102, location 3 bin A010103, and location 4 bin A010104. And these are the associated quantities. And again, at a high level, it's showing me I've got 134 in bin tracking plus 5, 139, but in IC I have got 143. So there is a variance between the BT quantity and the IC quantity, whereas because all my items are only in one bin per location for the other items on this inquiry, and because there's only one bin per the location with that item in, you can see at a glance that these ones are not out of sync. And my filter is building up along the bottom here. So if I was, for example, filtering on items which have 12 items per case, I could filter for quantities greater than 12, and then it would show me all the ones with, with case quantities. So your filters are cumulative. The item by unit of measure inquiry is designed to show you by movement into and out of a location by unit of measure to show you per item how much you have per unit of measure. But bin tracking is not keeping track of the quantities per unit of measure, but it is showing you, when you look at the complete transaction history, the movement in and out by unit of measure. Not a good example, but had I been moving in by case and out by each, I should see approximately how many unbroken cases I have. Although again, it's theoretical, it's not keeping track of movements per unit of measure. And if we show in total only, it'll total by unit of measure. And that again should show you if all the movements have happened in a crate quantity, then you would see the total movement by crate. For the reports, we have an item and bin report, which is similar to the inquiry I've just shown you, a detail of your bin transfer history. The bin transfer reconciliation is more of a management report. By transaction type or for all transactions, this shows you where the quantities on the source documents do not match the target documents. So if you were looking, for example, for some missing stock, you might see that the OE shipment was for a quantity of 3, but on the bin transfer document, there was only a quantity of 2. And you can select your documents based on the status of the bin transfer and whether or not you want to show variance-only lines. The other management style report is the bin totals versus the location totals report. Here again, you can print the report showing variance-only lines or all lines, and you can do it by location and for items. So if we look at location, all our locations, and print variance-only lines, we expect to see the negative quantities that IC has and the other items which are out of sync with respect to bin tracking. I should have selected show 0 variance lines being no. We've still got our negative stock in IC, our items where we need to capture our serials and lots, and our A11030 is at variance of 4. 139 by bin, IC is 143. Back in the bin setup, you can specify some additional validations per item per bin. You can specify a restocking level, so when the stock falls below that level, then this will be shown on a bin tracking report to show that this item needs restocking, and that's the restocking quantity. You can also specify a maximum quantity per bin, but this is not used by bin tracking. You can, however, use Extender to validate against this quantity if you want to apply some sort of capacity planning for your bins. But if you filled in a restocking level and a restocking quantity for an item, then they will show on this report. They will show on the bin replenishment report. So there's no automatic bin replenishment, but every evening you could run the bin replenishment report, selecting only those items that require restocking, and it will show any items where the quantity on hand is less than the restocking quantity and suggests that you restock by 300. The final bin tracking report that can assist with using empty bins is the empty bins report. So it will display all the bins that are empty. In the periodic processing, we have the Deactivate Empty Bins option. So this allows you to deactivate or make inactive all bins that are empty. And you can select whether or not you include temporary bins only. So in this case, if you are using temporary bins for a container that arrives and you pick from the container, you could clear temporary bins only. And if they were empty, it would make them inactive. In summary, we've just seen the bin tracking setup, the options, the bins, and the optional fields. And with data entry, we saw how to record bins against a document that auto pops up with the source document. We entered a PO receipt and the bin transfer order popped up and we confirmed the bins. Then we did a sales shipment and opened the associated bin transfer through the PICS data screen and entered the bins and confirmed the bins. We've also seen on the physical inventory side and data take-on side how to create a bin transfer document where the source is none to do a take-on if your IC has already started before your bin tracking. We ran a stocktake starting in IC and then entered the bin counts in our BT worksheet and posted our BT worksheet. We also generated a worksheet from bin tracking by a range of bins and then entered the counts and posted that worksheet and saw that that created an IC adjustment as opposed to updating the IC worksheet as the previous stocktake had done. We had a look at the reports and inquiries, the transaction-oriented ones, showing items per bin or the history by location or the bin transfer history and empty bins. And we also looked at the management reports, the bin transfer reconciliation report, bin totals versus location totals, and our bin replenishment report. And we had a quick look at the periodic processing, where we can deactivate empty bins, either temporary ones only or all empty bins can be deactivated. And finally, a review of the top support questions for bin tracking. How do you print bins on the picking slip? So we've seen how we can copy the OE OY pick ship report, OE OY pick order report, or the purchase order PO OY receipt report into the appropriate directories and use those with your picking slips from order entry. We've also seen that we recommend that you use the picking slip from the shipment, that you do your shipment, and at that point the bins will be allocated, and then you've got your picking slip from allocated bins. We discussed if you print it from the sales order, then it's just a suggested bin and does not take into consideration other picking slips printed not yet shipped. And on the purchase order side, bin tracking always allocates the first available bin, does not take into consideration capacity planning. Can you sort the OE picking slip by bin? Yes, you can if you're doing it from the OE pick ship report. So if you're doing your bin transfer picking from the OE shipment, you can sort by bin. But you cannot sort by bin if you're doing it from the sales order, as it is just a suggested bin. How do I take on my quantities per bin? So we've seen that if you start inventory control and bin tracking at the same time, then you would capture your bins with the source document that you take on your IC quantities with. But if you start bin tracking after IC, you can either create BT document where the source document is none, or you can generate an inventory worksheet, enter the bins on the BT worksheet, post the BT worksheet, and then delete the associated IC worksheet. Does bin tracking support item number change? Yes, it does. You should check your third-party directory for the appropriate files that needed for item number change. If you don't see these DI1, DI2, or DI3 files in your third-party directory, or you don't have this entry in the sidll.ini, then it means that your bin tracking was installed before the number change programs, and the bin tracking files are not in that directory. All you need to do is reinstall bin tracking and you'll get those number change files. If the IC quantities are right and the BT quantities are not, how do you adjust the BT quantities? So here you would create a bin transfer document where the source document is none, and then do a pick or a put away of all the items and quantities that you need to get your quantities in sync with IC. Is the bin capacity or the item volume taken into consideration when assigning bins to PO receipts or any putaways? No, it's not. There is a max quantity per item per bin, so you can use that to specify the dimensions of the bin or the number of an item, a quantity of an item that can fit in a bin, and you can design your own reports to get some sort of capacity planning, and you can use Extender to validate that no more than the maximum quantity is put in a particular bin. But out of the box, there's no bin capacity or item volume capacity planning taken into consideration. Thank you for watching this bin tracking training. Please go to our website for more information on bin tracking or any of our other modules.